My name is Amelia Turner and I'm 45 years old. I live with my husband, Russell, a quiet, hard-working man, in a 2-story wooden house on the outskirts of Boise, Idaho. The house once belonged to my grandmother, Edith, who passed it down to me before moving into a nursing home 6 years ago. Every brick, every door in this house holds a piece of my childhood, where I learned to ride a bike, where I hid under the table when Grandma scolded my dad for spilling her homemade blueberry jam. It's not a mansion, nor is it a dream home by social media standards, but to me it's everything. We have a son, Caleb, 21 years old, a junior studying environmental science at a public university in Oregon. He's smart, kind, and our greatest pride. But to keep him in school, Russell and I have had to pinch every penny. No summer vacations, no fancy weekend dinners. Everything in our home runs on the principle, don't replace it unless it's beyond repair. Russell works at a small building supply store 15 minutes from home. The pay isn't high, but it's steady, and his boss is a decent man. I work at the front desk of a private clinic in town. It can get stressful, but I care about our elderly patients. Some drop by just to chat for a few minutes. We live simply, avoid unnecessary debt, and save what we can so Caleb won't need massive student loans. We're not wealthy, but we are at peace. One Wednesday afternoon, sunlight was pouring through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the tile floor as I sliced onions for stew. Then Russell's phone rang from the living room, breaking the calm. I heard him answer, followed by an odd, drawn-out silence. "What? Mom, slow down. What's wrong with Dad?" His voice cracked. I stopped mid-splice, the knife frozen on the cutting board. Russell stepped into the kitchen, pale, eyes distant. "They've gone bankrupt," he exhaled, his voice shaking. "They lost everything, the jewelry stores, the house, everything." I gripped the towel in my hand, my heart sinking. What are they going to do now? "They want to come stay with us. Just for a little while, until they figure things out." I didn't answer right away. I thought about Caleb, about the tuition bill coming up, about the nights Russell and I spent going over electric bills, figuring out what we could delay for just one more week. And now, his parents, who had never hidden their disdain for how modestly we lived, wanted to move in? Russell looked at me, guilt and anxiety in his eyes. "I haven't said yes. This is your house, Amelia. I wouldn't bring them in without asking you first." I stayed silent for a moment. In my mind, I saw Grandma knitting by the window, Caleb napping on the couch after school. I swallowed my unease. "All right," I said slowly. "They can come. But this isn't a hotel, and they need to understand, it's temporary." Russell let out a relieved breath, but I knew, from that moment on, our peace would never be the same again. A week after that fateful call, my quiet Saturday morning began with the loud honk of a moving truck in front of the house. I stood frozen behind the living room curtain, watching as 2 massive trucks pulled into the driveway like they were unloading at a weekend resort. No one had warned us about how much stuff they'd bring. I looked at Russell, frantically directing the drivers, my eyes full of questions. He tried to smile, but I could tell he was just as panicked as I was. Their sleek black SUV parked at the curb, and out stepped my in-laws, Gerald and Patricia Turner, as if they were arriving at a luxury resort. Patricia, wearing a cream silk outfit, oversized sunglasses, and a heavy cloud of perfume, approached and kissed my cheek like some formal ritual. "Dear Amelia," she said, "thank you for welcoming us. It's been tough leaving behind our penthouse." I forced a smile. "Well, welcome to reality." Gerald, once the owner of 3 upscale jewelry stores in Arizona, walked in like he was inspecting a new investment. His eyes scanned our home, frowning at our faded dining set and the worn reading chair I'd used for years. "Cozy enough," he muttered, though his face said otherwise. Before I could react, a crew of movers began unloading box after box, labeled Italian crystal, artwork, and handle with care, sterling silver. A massive leather armchair, a walnut wine cabinet, even a grand piano took over our modest living room. I was stunned. "Russell," I whispered, "this was supposed to be temporary, right? Why are they bringing their entire house?" He pulled me aside, eyes darting toward the growing mountain of boxes. I don't know. I thought they'd bring just the essentials. I let out a bitter chuckle, my voice low and edged. Their essentials looked like a boutique furniture showroom. By noon, the ground floor of my home had transformed into a compact luxury gallery. My floral paintings were replaced with gold-scented abstract art, my simple vases pushed aside for expensive Chinese porcelain that Patricia claimed were non-negotiable. I realized then, we hadn't just let them into our house, we'd let them take it over. That evening, as I brought the salad to the table, I caught Gerald pulling a bottle of red wine from a wooden case. The label was one I recognized, costing more than my entire week's salary. Patricia was setting out bone china plates, the kind used for formal dinner parties. They acted as if they were re-establishing their domain. And I, the legal homeowner, was quietly being pushed out of the picture. Russell sat down next to me, gently taking my hand under the table. I could see the confusion and guilt in his eyes, but I also saw something else. If we didn't set boundaries soon, this temporary stay would become permanent. "Don't worry, Amelia," Russell whispered. "I'll talk to them tomorrow. This won't go any further." I nodded, though I didn't fully believe it, because in my own home, I was starting to feel like a stranger. And I knew this was just the beginning. I began noticing something off just 3 days after Gerald and Patricia moved in. What seemed like harmless habits at first gradually turned into a subtle occupation. The kitchen had once been my haven. I loved its neatness, the rhythmic sound of chopping vegetables each morning as I made breakfast for Russell. But now, every time I walked in, Patricia was already there, wearing her long silk robe, holding a cup of Earl Grey tea, and giving me a frosty look like I had trespassed into restricted territory. "Amelia," she'd say, stirring her tea as if lecturing a child, "you should really try extra virgin olive oil imported from Tuscany. The one you're using smells a bit too... local?" I bit my lip. "We buy that at the nearby supermarket. It's affordable and still good." She smiled, thin as paper. "Oh, of course. Everyone has their own standards." That was just the beginning. That evening, I made our usual vegetable stew. The kind Russell always said felt like a hug after a long day. But the moment I placed the pot on the table, Gerald raised his eyebrows like I had just insulted him. "This is... the main course?" He glanced at Russell, then back at me, as if waiting for an explanation. "No Angus beef? Not even some chuck roast?" Patricia set down her spoon. "Darling, she's trying," she said, though her tone was laced with sarcasm. "Not everyone was raised on weekly lamb chops like you." Russell took a spoonful of vegetables, staying quiet. I swallowed hard, feeling like I was being judged in my own kitchen. In the days that followed, meals turned into a quiet battlefield. I cooked our way, budget-friendly, nutritious. But Gerald and Patricia constantly refused to eat, or took a few bites before getting up to order takeout from the upscale Italian place in town. When I asked about the bill, they simply replied, "Just count it as part of living expenses." One day I discovered that Patricia had secretly written a grocery list and left it on the kitchen counter. On it were names I'd only ever heard on high-end cooking shows: French butter, wild-caught Alaskan salmon, imported cheeses. The list spanned nearly 3 pages, written in meticulous script like a piece of calligraphy. At the bottom she had written, "We can't live off cheap food forever." Russell grimaced when he saw it. "I'll talk to them," he promised. But I knew. He was caught between two sides. The pressure kept mounting. My fridge, once stocked with milk, eggs, vegetables, and a few frozen meals, was now packed with expensive items I had no idea how to cook. The top shelves were filled with food meant solely for Gerald and Patricia. What remained, for me and Russell, barely fit a couple of sandwiches and cheap grocery store salads. I started cooking 2 separate dinners each night, one for them, one for us. Russell protested but eventually stayed silent, watching me quietly wash 2 sets of pots and pans each night under the dim kitchen light. One evening, as I placed a simple plate of pasta on the table, Gerald cut into his steak on fine bone china and said casually, "Amelia, you should learn how to make beef Wellington. It's not that complicated, just takes a bit of effort." I looked at the now cold pasta on my plate, then at his beef. Likely worth our entire weekly grocery budget. I don't have time to wrap meat in pâté and bake it in puff pastry, I said, trying to stay calm. We both work full-time. Patricia nodded, her voice sugary sweet but sharp as a blade. Yes, well, I suppose when you're not used to higher standards, everything does feel exhausting. Russell put his fork down. He looked at them squarely, his eyes firm. That's enough, he said. This is Amelia's house. She's not your personal chef. If you're unhappy, we can eat separately, but don't expect her to sacrifice every evening to cater to you both. Gerald shook his head. Russell, don't let emotions cloud your judgment. We're family. A decent meal shouldn't be too much to ask. I clenched my glass, holding back a surge of emotion. I had tolerated enough. But I also knew, if I stayed quiet any longer, I'd lose not only my home, but the respect within it. That night, for the first time in weeks, I began drafting a plan to fight back. Less than a month after Gerald and Patricia moved in, I realized that every ounce of patience I had was being drained, bill by bill. I sat at the kitchen table, facing a pile of papers, utility bills, grocery receipts, and unexpected charges I was never consulted on. Last month's total spending was nearly double our usual. My heart sank as I stared at the numbers. All those Kobe beef dinners, imported tuna from Japan, and cases of Burgundy wine now sitting in our new wine cabinet had been charged against the budget Russell and I had set aside for Caleb's college. Patricia continued taking long hot baths 3 times a day, always surrounded by fresh flowers and mineral salts she had me buy from a high-end skincare store downtown. Gerald liked to keep the AC at 65 degrees all day, even when he was the only one home sitting in his favorite leather chair. Russell and I hardly ate together anymore. Not because we were upset with each other, but because the kitchen had become a private restaurant for 2 demanding guests. Our quiet evenings of soup and toast were now replaced by the clink of cutlery on china, complaints about meat temperatures, and judgmental stares whenever I served anything below standard. One night, as I sat down with a plate of salad and an egg sandwich, Patricia looked at Russell and said, as if I wasn't even there, Russell, maybe it's time to rethink the budget. Your wife's, dinner looks like something from summer camp. I put my fork down, trying hard not to get up right then and there. Gerald pulled out his phone, tapping away before saying, I'm ordering from that French place my friend owns. Amelia, you should try the duck à l'orange. Eating like that, he gestured to my plate, makes it look like you're on a bankruptcy diet. Russell didn't say a word, but I saw his fist clench under the table. The breaking point came on Friday afternoon, right after I got home from a long shift at the clinic. I hadn't even changed clothes when Patricia met me at the door, holding a glossy receipt from a high-end fashion boutique in Seattle. I just found the most beautiful cashmere coat, she said, practically beaming. It's 20% off. What a rare opportunity. I looked at the total, $1,280. You want me to pay for this? I asked, my throat dry. Patricia chuckled. Not now. Caleb still has that college fund, right? He can take out more loans. All kids do nowadays. But me, I'm not young enough to wait for the next sale. I stood frozen. A wave of disbelief and fury surged through me like a tsunami. No, I said slowly, each word pressed down with force. I will not let you take a single cent from my son's college fund. Gerald appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. Why so dramatic, Amelia? We're family. Family helps each other in hard times. I turned to him, my eyes no longer avoiding his. Help doesn't mean suffocation. Russell stepped in, his face flushed red after hearing what had just been said. Please don't bring this up again, he said, voice taut with anger. Caleb's tuition is off limits. That's his future. Patricia rolled her eyes, then crossed her arms like she'd just been insulted. I didn't think my son would let his wife dominate him like this. Gerald nodded, voice low and edged with warning. Russell, if you let this continue, it won't just be family who hears about it. Maybe the whole community will learn how you mistreat your own parents. I stepped forward. My voice was no longer shaky. Then go ahead, Gerald. Tell the whole world that my husband and I refuse to let his parents waste their grandson's college money. Let's see whose side people take. Silence fell across the entire house. For the first time, I saw pride in Russell's eyes, even though his face remained tense. Patricia turned away, her eyes brimming with tears as if I had been the cruel one. Gerald muttered one last sentence. "You'll regret this." That night I sat in our bedroom staring out the window at the streetlight, my heart hollow. I knew one thing for sure. The storm hadn't passed, it had only just begun. The following evening, dinner in our house felt suffocating. On the table were 2 imported steaks. Patricia had insisted I order from an upscale restaurant in the city, plated on her precious bone china. And for me and Russell? We had lentil soup made with leftover carrots and a few slices of toasted bread. Nothing new. This had become the depressing routine for the past 2 weeks. Patricia savored a bite of steak, then glanced at my bowl of soup with thinly veiled disdain. "Amelia," she said, placing her utensils down like she was about to make an official announcement. "You need to understand one thing. When living with family, the quality of life shouldn't be dragged down just because someone has budget constraints." Before I could reply, Gerald cut in, his voice flat but dripping with judgment. "Russell, you're a grown man. How can you sit there and watch your wife serve dinner like we're in some kind of boot camp?" Russell put his spoon down. I saw it in his eyes. Something had snapped. He braced his hands on the table, slowly stood up and turned to face them. Not as the easygoing son they once knew, but as the man of this house, defending what was his. "That's enough," he said, his voice deep and clear enough to make Patricia freeze mid-breath. "This is Amelia's house, the house her grandmother left to her. A home we've worked in, lived in, and raised our child with our own hands. You came here for help when things fell apart and we opened our doors. But from day one you treated this place like a hotel, and us like your staff." "Russell, you've misunderstood," Patricia interrupted, trying to salvage the mood. "No, I understand exactly what's happening," he cut her off, eyes locked on them. "Starting today, no more separate meals. Every dinner will be shared, one menu, cooked within our budget. Don't like it? You're free to cook for yourselves, but you won't be using this household credit card to do it." Gerald raised an eyebrow. "So, we're supposed to eat like you? Porridge and instant noodles?" I put my spoon down. For the first time in days I wasn't afraid to speak. "That's what we've been living on, and it's been enough to keep us working, to maintain this house, pay for Caleb's education, and cover everything you two are enjoying for free." Patricia leaned back in her chair, her gaze distant for a moment. But Gerald wasn't going to give in so easily. "My son's being led around by his wife? How sad." He shook his head. "You used to be strong, Russell, now look at you." "Beth." The sound of Russell slamming his hand on the table echoed through the room. The water glass rattled, silverware clinked sharply against china. "Enough. If anyone in this house insults my wife again, I'll be the first one to pack your bags and drive you out of here." No one spoke. The air was frozen solid. I felt a tightness in my chest. Not from anger this time, but from the swell of emotion rising. A moment later, Russell's tone softened, but his words stayed firm. "We can't keep going like this. We've tried. But if you want to stay, you have to respect the way this home operates. If not, then it's time you find another place to live." Patricia lowered her head in silence. Gerald took a deep breath, then stood up and walked upstairs without saying another word. Dinner ended in silence, but for the first time in weeks that silence felt necessary. After cleaning up, Russell and I sat on the front porch. The night breeze was cool, but his hand holding mine made my heart warm again. "I'm sorry I let you endure this for so long," he whispered. I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I know you tried, but from now on we're in this together, no more backing down." That night I slept better than I had in weeks, but I also knew calm waters rarely stay still for long. We thought things might finally settle down after that tense dinner, but I soon realized the peace in our house was nothing more than a thin coat of paint covering the storm beneath. 3 days after the family meeting, I came home from the clinic to a strange, rich aroma, luxurious and unmistakably not from the vegetable soup I'd prepped the night before. I walked into the kitchen and froze. On the table were 2 fancy takeout boxes from La Brasserie. the upscale French restaurant Russell and I only dared to admire from outside their window. Beside them sat a deep red bottle of Italian wine, already uncorked, with 2 sparkling crystal glasses. Patricia emerged from the living room, hair tied up, wearing a new velvet robe. "Oh, Amelia, you're back. I noticed no one was cooking today, so I ordered something light." "We already agreed, Patricia." I kept my voice steady. "No one orders food without paying for it themselves. You did the opposite." She gave a soft laugh and shrugged, like I'd just complained about the weather. "I figured I could settle up later. Gerald will reimburse it." Just then, Gerald walked in from the yard, phone in hand. He didn't look the least bit surprised to see me, like this had all been pre-planned. "Sweetheart, tonight's dinner is a little treat. Let's not be so rigid. Life needs a touch of elegance, don't you think?" I didn't answer. I simply stepped forward and stared at the 2 receipts, totaling over $230. That night, Russell called them into the kitchen. He laid the receipts out on the table, his voice firm and clear. "This is the last time. Any unplanned expenses from now on must be paid immediately, otherwise please move out." Gerald frowned. Patricia stayed quiet, but her eyes betrayed her simmering anger. I knew they wouldn't stop easily. And I was right. One afternoon, as I was wiping down the old bookshelf under the stairs, I heard a loud crash. From the living room, shattering glass. I ran in to find my grandmother's green crystal vase, one of the most precious keepsakes in the house, laying in pieces across the hardwood floor. Gerald stood there, still holding a magazine. He looked at the shards and shrugged. "Loose table leg. Who could have guessed? That thing probably wasn't worth much anyway." I was speechless, my whole body shook, not from the vase, but from that careless attitude. "That was the last gift my grandmother gave me before moving into assisted living," I said, voice tight. "It's not something you measure in dollar value." Patricia walked in from the kitchen, saw the mess, and let out a light laugh. "Oh, come on, don't get worked up over an old vase. If you want, I'll find you a similar one at an antique shop." Russell walked in just as I was picking up the shards with my bare hands. He rushed over, pulled the cloth from my grip, then turned sharply to Gerald. "You broke it?" he asked, voice hoarse with restrained fury. Gerald didn't deny it. "Yeah. But like I said, accident. Want a full incident report?" The air turned thick. I saw Russell's jaw tighten. He looked at me, then back at them. "We've been far too accommodating," he said, eyes sharp as blades. "You broke the agreement, kept spending recklessly, and now destroyed something we deeply value." Patricia folded her arms, tone dripping with sarcasm. "If everything here is so valuable, why not lock it all in a glass case?" I shot to my feet, my face flushing hot. "Because this is my house, and I thought, foolishly, that when you welcome someone into your home, you shouldn't have to hide what matters most, just to keep it safe." I was wrong. Gerald smirked. "Honestly, I think we were the ones who made the mistake, coming back here at all." I walked straight toward the stairs, but before leaving I turned around and said loud enough for both of them to hear, "Tomorrow, we're going to sit down. One last time. If you don't accept the terms of living here, I'll be contacting the family attorney. This house is still under my name." Patricia froze. Gerald squinted, as if for the first time they truly felt control slipping from their hands. That evening I took the old photo of my grandmother down from the wall and placed it on the nightstand. I whispered, "I'm sorry I haven't kept the house the way you hoped, but tomorrow I'm taking it back." And I knew just one more step and I could reclaim the peace we had lost. That night, after sweeping up the shattered remains of the vase Grandma left me, I sat alone in the bedroom, the warm glow from the bedside lamp lighting up the old photo of me and Grandma Edith on the front porch. She was over 80 years old now, living in a nursing home north of Spokane, but I knew, even in her old age, her mind was sharper than anyone I'd ever met. I picked up the phone, hesitated for a moment, then dialed. She picked up after 3 rings. "My sweet Amelia, is everything okay?" Her voice was gentle but alert. She always knew when something was wrong, even before I said a word. I started crying. Not sobbing, not shouting, but quiet tears that finally released the burden I had carried for too long. I told her everything. From the divided meals, the condescending tone, to how Gerald broke the keepsake vase without a hint of remorse. She listened in silence, only murmuring a soft every now and then. When I finished, I choked out, I don't know what to do anymore, Grandma. After a pause, her voice came through. No longer the gentle tone I knew, but the voice of a woman who once ran a full farm and raised 5 children during the Depression. Then it's time for me to come back. I won't let you stand alone against 2 grown adults acting like children. I'll be on the first bus tomorrow. But Grandma, the nursing home, the doctor said. I hesitated. The doctor said I need peace and quiet, not helplessness. Right now, the most peaceful thing for my heart is to protect my granddaughter. I couldn't speak. For the first time in weeks, I felt something bloom in my chest, something like hope. 2 days later, a silver SUV pulled up in front of the house. I opened the door and saw Grandma Edith, in her teal cardigan, cane in hand, eyes bright like a flashlight cutting through the dark. Surprised? She grinned, nodding toward the back seat. Help me with my suitcase, it's heavy, full of property contracts. Patricia peeked out from the kitchen, freezing the moment she saw her. Gerald pretended to read the newspaper, but I saw his eyes dart. Calculating. I'll take the downstairs study, Grandma declared like a general reclaiming her post. It needs some tidying, but it's time that room served its purpose again. The downstairs is for guests, Patricia muttered. I'm not a guest, I'm the owner, Grandma shot back without hesitation. That night she called everyone into the living room for an emergency meeting. Gerald was 3 minutes late and she scolded him outright. Next time, be on time. This isn't a golf game. She pulled out a stack of papers and laid them on the table. This house is still under my name. I granted Russell and Amelia long-term occupancy rights, which do not include transfer to anyone else. And I certainly never approved turning my home into a French restaurant or high-expense spa. Patricia went pale. Gerald tried to interrupt, but she raised her hand to silence him. I'm not finished. Starting today, if you wish to stay, each of you will pay reasonable rent, $2,000 per person, per month. If you don't agree, please find alternative housing within 10 days. Grandma Edith, that amount is outrageous, Gerald snapped. It's no more than what you've already spent on salmon, imported beef, and wine every week, she replied, not blinking. The room went quiet. And if you do stay, she continued, you'll assist me, take me to appointments, help with meals, and clean the downstairs. I don't need guests. I need people who behave like family, not royalty demanding service. Patricia pressed her lips together. Gerald crossed his arms, face flushed. But for the first time, I saw their eyes filled not with arrogance, but confusion. After Edith's meeting, the atmosphere in the house changed dramatically. No one dared order takeout anymore. My grandmother, though elderly, only needed a single glance to return the household to order. That evening, I sat beside her on the porch. The moonlight glinted off her silver hair, and in that moment she looked like she belonged to the house, like a piece of its quiet soul that had finally returned home. Thank you, Grandma, I whispered. She gently squeezed my hand. You're stronger than you think. But being strong doesn't mean you have to be alone. I nodded, and for the first time in days I could finally exhale. The battle wasn't over, but at least I no longer had to fight it alone. The next morning, the air in the house still hung heavy with the weight of Edith's words from the night before. I woke up early and headed to the kitchen to make coffee, only to find her already sitting there, upright in her wooden chair, holding a thick notebook like a head accountant preparing a quarterly report. Russell walked in after me, still rubbing the sleep from his eyes, when she looked up and said, Russell, we need to have a clear conversation with your parents today. We can't let this house become a stage where someone else plays the lead. I nodded, heart pounding faster than usual. I knew, when Grandma Edith spoke like that, she meant every word. At 9 a.m., Gerald and Patricia entered the living room as requested. Patricia wore a faux fur coat, one of the few items she hadn't yet sold or stashed. Gerald wore his usual expression of nonchalance, as if everything that had happened these past few days was nothing more than a mildly unpleasant tea party. Grandma Edith sat in the center of the room like a judge who'd heard enough testimony. I'll be direct, she began, her tone steady but firm. Starting today, you have 2 options. 1. Pay $4,000 a month in rent, This is a valuable home, and you've been living like it's a five-star resort. Patricia's jaw dropped. $4,000, are you joking, in a small town like this? Edith smiled slightly. I'm not quoting market price, I'm naming the cost of coexisting with other people's dignity. Gerald frowned and stood up. I don't think you have the right to force this. She raised a file folder and flipped to a page bearing a notary seal. I am the legal owner. All usage rights granted to Amelia and Russell are temporary and revocable if I believe the family's well-being is being compromised. I stayed quiet in the corner of the room, but every word Grandma spoke sliced through Gerald and Patricia's pretense like a blade. If you don't want to pay, she continued, then option 2. Stay, but help care for me every day. That includes cleaning the first floor, preparing meals for the household, taking me to my appointments, and making sure I don't have to carry bottled water around like before. Patricia let out a short gasp. You want us to be house staff? Edith didn't blink. I want fairness. I've let you stay here for 2 months rent-free, break things, insult my grandchildren, and still act like victims. Gerald clenched his jaw. And what if we choose neither? She shrugged and tapped the armrest of her chair. Then in 10 days I'll have my lawyer file for eviction. It's that simple. The room fell into total silence. No one dared to speak. Russell finally broke the tension. Mom, Dad, we never wanted it to come to this. But if we're going to live together, everyone has to be accountable. No one stands above the rest. I added, meeting Patricia's eyes for the first time without fear. My son Caleb shouldn't have to sacrifice his future just so you two can live in luxury. Patricia glanced at Gerald, her eyes filled with doubt. Gerald stayed silent, his expression shifting as if mentally calculating his exit strategy. Grandma Edith stood, cane in hand, and walked to the center of the room. Slow but firm. I'll expect your answer by next Monday morning, and if I don't get one, I'll assume you've chosen the third option, leave this house. She turned and walked away, leaving behind a chilling silence. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, counting down the final days for our uninvited guests. That night, Russell and I sat on the porch, our fingers laced together. The house was eerily quiet. No complaints, no takeout aromas, no high heels clacking on hardwood. I rested my head on his shoulder. What do you think they'll do? Russell sighed. I'm not sure, but this time they know they can't push us around. I let out a faint laugh, though my chest was still tight. I've never seen Grandma that fierce before. She's Edith, Russell said, half joking. When she sets her mind to something, the universe steps aside. I looked out at the yard where the porch lights cast a golden glow on the trees. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Not as a fantasy, but as something real. We weren't alone anymore. And this house, finally, was becoming what it was meant to be. A home, not a hotel for the entitled. On Monday morning, just as Grandma Edith had scheduled, I walked down to the living room with a strange calm. Not dread, but anticipation with a pinch of nerves. Russell had gotten up early to help make coffee. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. We both knew this day was a turning point. At exactly 9 a.m., Gerald and Patricia appeared. They no longer walked with that haughty strut. Instead, their demeanor was quiet, tired. Patricia wore an old gray sweater with no makeup, and Gerald's stubble had grown out, making him look visibly older in just a few days. They sat across from us. Grandma Edith remained in her chair at the center, her gaze as sharp as the day she stepped through that door. Gerald was the first to speak, his voice low and slow. We have thought it through, and we've decided to leave. I didn't hide my surprise. Even though I had prepared myself for this, hearing them admit it out loud stirred something hard to describe. Patricia continued, and for the first time in weeks, her voice didn't carry that usual sarcasm. We found a small 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Spokane. It's not a penthouse, but it'll do. Gerald gave a small nod. An old friend offered it at a reduced price. We had to sell a few things to pay off some debt and cover the deposit. The room was silent for a moment. Grandma Edith gently set her teacup down on the table. I respect that choice. Sometimes a smaller space helps you see the bigger things in life more clearly. Patricia lowered her gaze. Gerald said nothing more, but for the first time he didn't look at Amelia with superiority. 2 days later, a small moving truck pulled up to the curb. No massive trucks, no team of 4 or 5 movers like when they arrived. Just one older man and a young guy, slowly carrying boxes out from the garage. I stood on the porch, watching the scene with a strange sense of relief, yet not satisfaction. It wasn't triumph. It felt more like someone had just taken a heavy yoke off my neck. Patricia walked past me, carrying a small box filled with old photo frames. She paused, turned back, and there was something softer in her eyes. I was wrong, Amelia. I shouldn't have treated you like that in your own home. I gave a small nod. No bitterness remained in my heart. Gerald followed, rolling a suitcase. No luxury watch on his wrist anymore. Russell, he said as his son stepped forward to help, you're stronger than I gave you credit for. Hold on to that. Russell just gave his father's hand a gentle squeeze. That afternoon, when the house returned to its quiet state, Grandma Edith called me out to the backyard. She sat on the old rocking chair, folding up several papers in her file folder. You know, she began, when I signed over the living rights to this house, I worried you'd be too soft on people who didn't know boundaries. But today, I'm proud. I sat beside her and smiled quietly. It took me a long time to learn that lesson. And now you've learned it. This isn't just a house. It's a border, and you now know how to defend it. A week later, I heard that Gerald and Patricia had sold some jewelry, a few expensive furniture pieces, and repaid their emergency bank loan. Their new apartment was in a retirement complex, not far from downtown, but quiet enough. No more lavish visitors. No French wine or imported steak. But I heard they'd started cooking their own meals. The story didn't end with a collapse. It ended with a timely fall that reminded them the ground was still beneath their feet. That night, Russell, Grandma Edith, and I sat around the cleaned wooden table. No fancy courses. Just carrot soup, toasted bread, and a peace so deep it made me feel grateful. How long are you staying, Grandma? I asked while clearing the table. Until the day my little Amelia doesn't tremble when she reaches for the phone to ask for help, she said, her eyes twinkling. I hugged her tightly, knowing that while the storm had passed, the light she brought would never leave. 2 weeks after Gerald and Patricia left, our house returned to its natural rhythm. Quiet, tidy, and warm. No more complaints about low-class meals, no more perfume lingering in the halls, and, most importantly, no more feeling like a guest in my own home. Grandma Edith stayed. She said, "My granddaughter has fought long enough alone. Now I want to see her truly relax." Honestly, I didn't want her to leave anytime soon. Every morning, I'd wake to the gentle creak of the rocking chair on the back porch, the scent of peppermint tea wafting from the kitchen, and her familiar morning call. Rise and shine, sweetheart, even strong women need a proper breakfast. She never brought up the past again, never mentioned Gerald or Patricia. Instead, she told stories of the days when she raised 4 kids selling milk and eggs, when she worked 2 jobs to keep the house from foreclosure. Every story felt like a sprinkle of courage landing gently in my chest. One Sunday morning, while I was hanging laundry out on the porch, she stepped out with her cane, looked toward the hills, and quietly said, "As I think it's time I head back to the retirement home. I know my work here is done." I set the blanket down and took her hand. "Are you sure? How about staying a few more days? I still need someone to tell bedtime stories." She chuckled. "No, Amelia, you've changed. The way you stand, the way you set boundaries, the way you protect your family. I'm not worried about you anymore. A strong woman doesn't need someone to stand in front of her, just beside her." I hugged Grandma tightly, unable to speak. Her presence had been like a quiet pillar in the storm. When everything felt on the verge of collapse, she was the one who held this house together. That afternoon, Russell drove her back to the retirement home. Before getting into the car, she turned and said, "Don't let anyone cross the boundaries you've drawn, especially those who call themselves family, but forget the word respect." I nodded, watching the car disappear down the bend, feeling both relieved and strangely hollow. What I didn't expect was that, the moment the door closed, I felt more confident than ever. Life with Russell slowly returned to rhythm. Simple dinners filled with laughter, quiet afternoons working on the backyard, and evening FaceTime calls with Caleb as he excitedly shared stories about class. I realized I no longer glanced nervously at every price tag at the grocery store. Not because we had more money, but because I had less fear. We started rebuilding our financial plans. All the unnecessary spending caused by Gerald and Patricia was cut, and our budget began to recover. Russell even joked, "I think we might save enough to fix the front porch, so you can sit there and tell stories to our grandkids someday." I smiled, but my throat tightened. Because he was right. I had reclaimed our future. Not through screaming matches, but through quiet resolve. One day I received a postcard, no return address, but I instantly recognized the handwriting. "Thank you for showing us the limits of kindness. We're learning to stand on our own. Hopefully one day we can visit without bringing baggage, both literal and emotional." I placed the card on the bookshelf beside Grandma's photo. Maybe they hadn't changed entirely, but admitting fault was already a step forward. That evening, I sat on the porch watching the moon rise, one hand holding a book, the other wrapped around Russell's shoulder. I whispered, "Do you think we've changed?" Russell turned to me. "Yes, but in the way I've always hoped we would." I nodded. And I understood. If there was one lesson I had taken from these trying months, it was this. No one can protect you better than you can protect yourself, and once you're steady on your own feet, you're strong enough to protect those you love. Amela's story is a powerful reminder that kindness must have limits, and silence, when prolonged, only invites others to overstep. In real life, many have experienced being taken advantage of by their own family under the guise of hospitality and patience. But when we find the courage to say no, to defend our values and protect those we love, it's not selfish, it's growth. Because no one can stand up for us better than we can. What do you think of how Amelia Russell handled the situation? What would you do if you were in their shoes? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories.